of our population that live in poverty, but I really invite people, don't think about, only poor people are the ones living in poverty. The federal poverty level for a family of 4 is just a little more than $25,000. But we have 3 out of 10 households in our county who are living paycheck to paycheck or in poverty. That's sometimes referred to as the ALICE population, which stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. So you get paid every 2 weeks. At the end of that 2 weeks, you have no money left between your housing and your healthcare and food and transportation. End of that 2 weeks, there's no money left. You're just waiting for that next paycheck to arrive. But then pandemic hits, there's lockdown, many people are unemployed, and suddenly you miss one paycheck and people were having to go out to the food pantries. So Putnam County has 8 food pantries, serving many hundreds of people every single week. And at the height of the lockdown, many pantries were reporting like 200% increases in the clients that they were serving. And many of those people had never visited a food pantry before. And yet, according to the NRDC, if we rescue just 15% of the food that we waste, we could rescue enough to feed 25 million people. So crazy, stupid, environmental humanitarian issue that we're dealing with. So Second Chance Foods, again, we're a food rescue organization. So we rescue from mostly from grocery stores and farms, but also from restaurant suppliers, wholesalers, home delivery services. I'm really proud of our farm rescue program because of course that's going to be the freshest, healthiest, most delicious food possible. We have a pantry garden that Joe knows very well because he was volunteering, harvesting 3 days a week from it last year. Just a private man who he does everything except for the harvesting and distributing, grows really beautiful food. We also have relationships with 3 different private orchard owners. These people, who've got an awful lot of money and they have their own private, apple, peach, plum, pear orchards, and they share food with us. So we're not a small organization in terms of our impact. In 2020, we rescued and donated over 276,000 pounds of groceries. So that's, apples, oranges, over 90% of what we rescue is in the form of fresh produce. If we use a value that City Harvest uses, City Harvest, has been around for, close to 40 years in New York City. They use a wholesale value of $1.74 per pound. So that's about $481,000 worth of food that we donated in the form of groceries last year. We also take some of the food that we rescue and we cook with it. If you were on the call earlier, you might have heard that we have commercial kitchen space over at the old Melrose School in Brewster. We rent from the sisters over there, Community of the Holy Spirit. And we created over 26,000 servings of food last year. The USDA has a program where they'll reimburse about $2 per meal. So if I use that number of $2 per meal, that's over $52,000 worth of meals that we donated. And we are powered by volunteers. We are very, the work we do is very labor intensive, requires a lot of effort. So our volunteers spent 4,500 hours last year cooking delicious meals, 1,700 hours transporting. It's got to get from point A to point B. Over 350 hours harvesting at local farms, which is a value of $180,000. So between food donations and labor donations, it's about $713,000 of in-kind donations to us. And we shared food with 18 different food programs in 2020. We service pretty much all the food pantries throughout Putnam County to different degrees, and some programs in Southern Dutchess and a lot of programs in Northern Westchester as well, both food pantries and soup kitchens. So of course, this is an environmental group, so we don't want to ignore what the whole the whole environmental issue is around food waste. When you really break down and get into what are we squandering when we waste food, it's pretty mind-blowing to just think about all the different levels of waste that are happening. So when food is not eaten, we have squandered the seeds. I mean, you might think, oh, seeds are just those little tiny things, but if you really bring it back, you have to grow food to make seeds. So you're wasting not just that seed, you're wasting all the food that was grown in order to make that seed, and all the packaging that went into transporting those seeds, and water. 14% of all freshwater use goes to growing food that ends up in the garbage. 14%, huge amount of water waste. The energy that goes into growing food that's going to get wasted, between the gas-powered farm equipment, all the refrigeration chain, transporting food. When we get food, like in a rescue or donation, and I see it came from like New Zealand, and it was going to get thrown away, like that's just crazy. The land, there are 80 million acres devoted to growing food that gets thrown away. That's about 3/4 the size of California. So huge amounts of land. We cut down forests in order to grow food that ends up in the garbage. If we're dealing with non-organic food, the herbicides, non-organic fertilizers, think about the hours of labor that people are putting into growing food is going to end up in the garbage. The packaging, I mean, we all know we shop in regular grocery stores. You can barely buy a banana that doesn't come in packaging these days. And then the financial capital. I mean, it's billions of dollars worth of food that's grown and thrown away. And it's not free to throw food away. It costs money. So we're spending money to throw food away.
Hey, Martha,
Yeah.
there's a question.
Okay.
Are all these stats U.S. for the U.S.?
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, food waste happens globally, but it happens for different reasons around the globe. Like if you're dealing with, more like third world countries, most of the time it's refrigeration issues. If you're dealing with someplace like the US, a lot of it's kind of like our cultural expectations. If I went into any grocery store right now and they didn't have every single item I wanted, I probably wouldn't go back to that store, right? We expect every store, every day, at every time to have everything we want, right? And so that leads to a lot of waste. But I guess the facts like 80 million acres devoted to growing food that goes to waste, that's for the US only. And then, so we've already wasted all of this. Then we throw the food away, it goes into the landfill, it gets buried, it breaks down anaerobically, and it produces methane, a very powerful greenhouse gas. And in fact, food is the #1 contributor to the landfill. There's nothing that goes into the landfill in a greater mass than food. And so the food we waste is responsible for about 8% of global emissions. Huge, huge environmental issue, and so stupid. So the Environmental Protection Agency created this kind of upside down pyramid about what we should be doing about food waste. The very first thing is source reduction. Let's stop chopping down forests to grow more food to throw it into the garbage. We just need to stop producing so much. But when there is a surplus of food, the very first thing we should be doing is what Second Chance Foods does. It's feed hungry people. Recover that food and make sure it's getting to the people who need it. Just below that is feeding animals. I feel very proud that for periods of time, a lot of our food scraps actually go to feed animals, to feeding pigs or chickens. The EPA says that the next thing is industrial uses. So sometimes people like food to energy plants that happen. Then composting. You might have thought composting would be higher up on there, but it's actually pretty low down. And then at the very last possible thing we should do is put it in the landfill. Currently about 98% of food waste ends up in the landfill, but that's really the last resort. Joe has another poll I wanted him to share at this time. Just wanted people to see, where do you think the most food waste occurs? Do you think it's at farms? Do you think it's at manufacturers, the Campbell Soup Company? Do you think it's at consumer-facing organizations like restaurants, retailers, grocery stores, food service? Or do you think it's mostly in our homes?
Looks like Homes is getting a lot of votes.
It is. Why not farms? Nobody thinks of manufacturers. That's interesting. All right, what do we think? Is that pretty much everybody's had a chance to reply?
I should have mentioned that this is anonymous, by the way.
Yes. Wow, okay, so yeah, so looks like 73% of folks think it's in your homes. Well, you should have given yourself higher scores, I think, at the beginning of this presentation, because you're correct. I have to admit, when I look at how much food we rescue from consumer-facing organizations from farms, it's hard for me to believe. But that's the statistic, is most of the food that's wasted is wasted in our homes. So I just want to give you guys just a few ideas about how you might reduce your waste at home. And so we're going to call it the 4 C's. Consider, consume, contain, consumerism, and the 5th C is only after you've done all these things, then compost. So consider, think about what you're going to eat. I think meal planning helps so much with reducing food waste. You know, look at your week. What meals am I going to be cooking at home? What meals, you know, are going to be takeout, or I'm going out, or I'm going to my friend's house, or, you know, really get a good sense of how many meals am I going to be cooking at home? What am I going to be making? Then when you go to the store, the farmer's market, you know, pick up your CSA, you know, really be thinking about what ingredients and quantities do I need. And then one thing that's really helped me personally reduce food waste at home is when I get home from picking up my CSA or from the grocery store, I wash and I chop my vegetables right then. You know, I've got my head of lettuce, I get it all washed and spun and in a bag and ready to go. Because then when I get home from a long day, you know, it's just very easy then to have it all set to go. And, you know, I'll definitely be using what I have available at home then. And then in terms of consuming, you know, in stores, they use this practice of first in, first out. You know, they make sure that the milk with the closest sell-by date is going to be at the front, right? So we want to really be doing the same thing in our own refrigerators at home or freezers at home. Make sure that, you know, you're eating the oldest food first. So sometimes what people will do is they'll create a little bin in their fridge that literally says right on the front of it, use first. Or maybe create like a spot in your fridge, whatsoever it's most visible to you, to really use that food first and to, you know, make sure you're eating your leftovers. I think, you know, sometimes we open the fridge with what do I want to eat? And I'd just invite you to open the fridge with what needs to get eaten. And I'd also just say that the freezer, stock pot, and blender are like your best friends in terms of reducing your food waste at home. So many things can get frozen. You know, if you're not going to be able to use it right away, you know, put it in your freezer and then it'll be, you know, available for you another time. Your stock pot, you know, make your own stocks at home. Throw in all those, you know, vegetable scraps, bones if you're not a vegetarian. Make stock. Even if it's not like a super flavorful stock, you can use it to cook your rice or your pasta or other grains, and you'll still get all those micronutrients that you cooked out of those little bits of food. And the blender too, if you've got a blender and you drink smoothies, there's so much stuff that you can just throw in that blender. You know, the slightly smushy blueberries that you might not want to eat straight up, put them in the blender, you won't know the difference. Also in consume. So if you take nothing else away today, I'm going to say, please, please don't ever use the term expiration date again. Almost no food has an expiration date on it. Most of those labels are use by, sell by, best by. They're not, the dates they put on the food are not scientifically based. They're actually at the discretion of the manufacturer. And guess what the manufacturer wants us to do? They want us to go out and buy a new one. So the dates on the food are really more about quality and flavor. And even that, going beyond those dates, you're probably not going to see any difference in quality or flavor. I always say trust your senses. Look at the food. Does it look like it's got a different color, consistency, or texture? Not smell it. Does it smell okay? Does it smell like what you expect it to smell like? It does. Taste it. Does it taste okay? It's almost certainly okay. A few years ago, my kids and I created a little video where we tasted yogurt. One of them like had a date that was like a month old, and one was still the month, going out into the future. We could not tell the difference between these products, because especially with a product like yogurt, that's fermented, it's good for months past to the date. Canned foods, please don't donate your canned foods that are past date to the local food pantries, but go ahead and eat them yourself, because you'll find information online, but they're good for years past those dates on the packaging. All right, and then again, storage, so much information available online. If you have like a new food you've never had before and you're not really sure what to do with it when you get it home, look it up online. You'll find really good information, because some things do want to be at room temperature. Lots of things want to be in the fridge. Make sure, especially your dairy and your meats, are in the coldest parts of your refrigerator. Certain things do like to stay at room temperature. It's life-changing when I realized that I should not put my basil in the fridge, but pretend it's flowers, put in some water on the counter, put a plastic bag over it. Lasts like 2 weeks, where in 3 days in your fridge, it's gone. And then consumerism. There's lots of different for-profit businesses out there now who are really trying to reduce food waste. Probably there are people on this Zoom call today who buy produce through Misfits Market or Imperfect Produce. I hear lots of people really happy with those services. And then there's some more relatively new phone apps to get end-of-day restaurant leftovers. Too Good to Go is in Westchester County now. Haven't made it up to Putnam yet, but down in Westchester County, and then in New York City, if you're traveling into the city, Food for All also. So it's things like a bakery at the end of the day ends up with 20 extra bagels and 5 cheese danishes or whatever. You pay very low prices, and then they'll just, they give you the extra. So instead of throwing it away, they're getting a little money in, and it's going to people instead of into the landfill. So I'm hoping at the end of this presentation, you're like, oh my God, Second Chance Foods, amazing. What can I do to help them? I'd say the very easiest thing you can do if you're in social media, go on, like us, share a post on your own personal page. You probably don't know all your friends, so you'll help raise awareness of the work that we're doing. Put a little personal note on that post. Hey, here's a local group doing some really good work. Just like Joe invited us to present today to Sustainable Putnam, if you're part of another community group or place of worship where we can present about the work that we're doing, we'd love to do it. Volunteer, I meant to put in the chat before we started the link to our volunteer, but if you go to secondchancefoods.org, we have a volunteer tab on there, a page, and on there's a button to press, sign up here to volunteer, and it brings you to our Sign Up Genius. Right now, what you'll find on that volunteer page are cooking opportunities. So we cook every Tuesday and Friday in Brewster from 9:30 to 2:30. Summer's coming soon. The growing season is coming. We're definitely going to be looking for volunteers to help us harvest at local farms. And finally, just, if you're able, become a sustaining monthly donor. So our work is really about sustaining the health of our neighbors. It's about sustaining the health of our planet. And we really want to make sure that Second Chance Foods is also sustained. So thank you. That was my last slide. So I'm going to stop the share. I know, so we had the one question in the chat. I don't know if other people, I don't know, do you typically just let people unmute themselves to ask? Or?
Sure, yeah, feel free to do that, folks. And Martha, I put your website web address in the chat already.
Great.
And yeah, and Marielle's commented that she's retiring in June and is eager to volunteer. That's great. That's exactly what happened with me, Mary Alice. I retired last June, and Martha called me and said, "Would you be willing to do some harvesting?" And before I knew it, I was doing it 3 mornings a week, or just a couple of hours each morning, and it was great. I loved it. It was great to be outside. It was great to be, in a beautiful garden. And great to know that I was delivering food to people that really needed it.
Great, thank you.
I see James raising his hand. James, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, feel free to
Yeah.
unmute.
Yes, please. Thank you, Joe and Martha. I really appreciate your speech today, Martha. It's very informative, and I'm pretty surprised to learn that the expiration dates are not scientifically based. My question is, are the shelf lives that are based on those expiration dates outgoing from them? Would you say shelf lives are better to use as food waste thresholds than, and would they be more scientifically based than the 8 days return use?
So I'm not sure if I exactly followed, but so I would use the dates on the food as a guideline, right? So of course it depends on what the food is. Some are much more perishable than others. But in general, I would just recommend use your senses to, help you decide if the food is good or not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What I meant is
Okay.
for foods that are packaged in ways you can't sense them before you
Oh, I
use them.
see.
Are the shelf lives viable for those types of foods?
Okay, so if it's packaged, like before you've purchased, before you have it in your home, right? Then, you know what? If I'm not going to go to the store and buy a product that's past its date. If there's one right behind it that's, still has a date out in the future. So, but we do have things in our homes that end up being past to the date, and in those situations, of course, we can open them and decide.
I'm sorry, Martha. What I really mean is not the
Okay.
dates at all. I mean the
Oh, I'm
shelf
sorry.
lives. I mean shelf lives. Have you heard of shelf lives before?
Shelf life?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So the dates that describe how good food will be beyond the listed date.
So
Yeah.
shelf life referring to how long the food is good past the date on the food?
Yes.
Okay, right. So yeah, so you can look up online, if you have a can of tomatoes or something that says, I don't know, January 2020, is this still good? Yes, it is. Especially canned goods, again, often good for many years past those dates that are on them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
I'd
Carrie,
I'm sorry.
Oh,
So-
Martha knows I'm over in Phillipstown. We're on the far side, west side of the county. Martha, what are your recommendations for over here? Because to get people to come all the way to your side, over to Brewster, is not an easy task. So are there recommendations that we can take forward? I'm also with the Climate Smart Task Force. And in terms of recommendations, what would you say for the west side of the county?
Yeah, and you're talking about in terms of volunteering, right?
Well, volunteering or bringing food or organizations, that we should be
Okay.
supporting, kind of general big three.
Okay. So in terms of volunteering, one of our main farm partners is Glenwood Farm over in Cold Spring. And last year they did create a whole glean team for us, so that we didn't have to find all of the volunteers to harvest their excess produce. So Glenwood Farm, I imagine we'll be looking for volunteers again this year to do that. Organizations to support, of course, there is the Phillipstown Food Pantry. They're open every Saturday. They're feeding lots of people over there, so they're a great organization to support for sure. Yeah, I mean, you guys are close to Beacon as well. There's, you know, a lot of organizations up in Beacon too, Fairground and
You know, we've been looking at ways to recycle food. Is there anything, like, for example, might there be a space at the farmer's market where food can come to go to another place? Is that something that is viable, or is something stay away from because it's too many troubles, or?
yeah, you know, Glenwood did that last year. They helped us out with that by, you know, kind of working with the different vendors at the Cold Spring Farmers Market, and then also invited, you know, like home gardeners to also donate. And I don't know if they're planning on doing that again this year, or if we might find another Phillipstown resident interested in bringing that.
Cool. And then Edward.
Yeah, I was just happy to hear Martha mention something about the donations of food to the pantries. My wife was on for a little while and she had to jump for another meeting, but the Putnam Valley Community Food Pantry, working out of the back of Grace Church on the United Methodist Church on Peekskill Hollow Road. They've been around, I guess, about 10 years. And a lot of groups, you know, scouts, schools, religious organizations do fundraising. Not fundraising. Fundraising is great for them, but people donate, you know, canned goods. Some folks run to the store and buy tons of it and bring it over, but a lot of people clean their homes out. And every bag of groceries that comes into that food pantry sits on the counter until somebody can go through it. And on many occasions, I've had the time to help out, and I go through it, and I would say at least a third of what comes in goes into the dump, because people donate expired canned good with cans with expired dates on it. And as you said, I can eat them at home, but I can't give them to someone else, just like a grocery store.
That's right.
So the pantry can't give it out. And unless a volunteer wants to take it home, and that's usually not the case, if it's not in its original wrapping, if it's a 10-pack and there's 5 packs left, that goes in the garbage because they can't take that. Expired dates, dented cans, stuff that looks dirty, all that stuff. If people don't want it, you know, donating it to the pantries isn't the thing to do. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to anyway. Don't even go to ShopRite and buy 10 cans and donate them to the food pantry. Donate the money. The food pantry, they have ways of buying through the food bank. They can get so much more with the $10 that you donate than the 10 cans that cost you $10. Donate money if you want to help out a food pantry. And I just also want to say, like, that, you know, beyond its date can of food with the dusty top, it's not dignified. Let's give people dignity. Just because you can't afford to purchase food doesn't mean that you don't deserve dignity.
Yeah.
Martha, I was shocked during the pictures on television of people in line for food. And in Florida, especially, it just seemed like there were miles of cars. And one woman that was interviewed as she was waiting, she said it was her first time ever to do this, and that she had, since COVID, she had had 2 jobs and she was laid off from both. And she said, I'm really ashamed to do this. But she said, if I don't, we don't eat.
Right. Yeah. And then there are just so many people who really could benefit from going to a food pantry who feel like, oh, but there are other people who are in worse situations. So I should make sure they get the food. And but there's plenty of food for everybody. There really is. Like nobody should ever feel like, you know, I have enough cereal, so I'm not hungry. Right?
Mhm.
There's enough food for everyone.
I belong to the League of Women Voters, and I wonder if you'd be interested in doing a show with us. We haven't had a meeting of all the members in a while, and we like to have someone come and with some sort of program for us. And would you be interested in doing something like
Yeah,
that? Good.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Phyllis.
You're welcome.
So I don't want to call anybody out, but we do have a couple people here who have volunteered with Second Chance Foods. I don't know if they want to just share any of their experience of doing that. I won't call you by name. No, okay.
I'll jump in.
Oh gosh, oh my God, Pete Elder, yes.
I know that guy.
So
Me too.
so I do every Friday morning. I get up at 5 a.m. It's getting easier now that it's getting lighter earlier. But I get up at 5 a.m. and then I go over to the kitchen in Brewster and load up our poor Honda CRV up to the rafters with food, and then I bring it over to the food pantry over in Mahopac. And I find that I'm really grateful for that opportunity to do that once a week, because it really grounds me as to like what's most important, and it really helps me kind of prioritize and put challenges that I might hear, whether it's in the world or with a client or whatever else. It just puts it all in perspective. And so I think that's one of the wonderful things about this work. Plus the fact, one of the great ways to kind of pull out of like COVID depression is to help other people. And so I find that also there's just so many benefits to that. So I'm sure I've done it so many times in the past. And thank you again, Martha, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Not easy to fill that Friday morning at food has to arrive by 7:30 a.m. delivery. So that's great. Yeah.
I already mentioned my,
Yeah.
participation, but I was actually going to mention how Martha taught me about, the dignity issue, and, making sure that the produce that I was harvesting looked good, that I wasn't, any kale that was like, a bit insect eaten. It's fine to eat, right? But that's not what we want to be bringing to the food pantry. So it didn't go to waste, but it was not brought to the food pantry. I would eat it. We would cook it or eat it. Anything that didn't look presentable. And I just I just thought that was so much more humane than let's like the old dusty can of whatever creamed corn that's in the back of your cupboard that you're not going to eat. You give that to the food bank. No, it's you give them your best. So I agree with what Pete was saying too, that it just it helps you think in terms of what are we doing here on this planet? What are we doing with our days, especially while in COVID, and especially for somebody like me that I'm now retired. What am I doing with my time?
Yeah.
Other than if I'm not helping other people, then what's the point? So and I definitely got a great feeling from doing that at work.
It's part of why we cook with some of the food, is because it may not look first quality, kind of as is in terms of the produce, but we can cook with it, cut off any parts that maybe aren't as nice and really create a first quality product with it.
Hey, Martha, there's a question from Marcia. It's like, do people tend to donate food that's less healthy, like lots of pasta, rice, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I definitely do see that. It's interesting too, because those tend to be more affordable foods. right? So if I have limited dollars to spend through SNAP or through my own income, I'm going to buy those cheap foods that fill my belly. And, you know, the foods that I really need are the ones that I can't afford, like the fresh produce and the things that, you know, Second Chance Foods is able to rescue and get to local food pantries.
That's right.
Marcia, you want to ask more?
Yeah, well, just another point. Several years ago, I was heading up a book barn, and we had a problem with people donating things that were really did belong in the trash. And I wanted to get the word out, but I didn't want to limit it to just the book barn, and went around, and all of the food pantries and all the other kinds of charities have the same kind of problem where people are using them as a dump. And they will bring clothing that's unwearable, torn, stained, you know, inappropriate. And that actually creates an additional burden for the charity because it costs them to get rid of those unwanted goods. So it goes across the board when you're doing in-kind donations to make sure it's of usable quality, because, you know, I mean, it started at the library, we were having to pay haulers to get rid of literally tons of books that were not suitable for reuse.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that. People unfortunately dump on charities a lot because, again, it's that attitude of, well, if you can't afford clothes, food, books, whatever, then you'll just deal with like the inferior quality.
It was so bad that one charity had people who were coming and, well, doing this so often that they got a dumpster, and then people were using their dumpster. It's awful.
Okay, so Phyllis had a hand, and then Karen.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ann.
Oh, Martha, I wondered if you volunteer to help gather the produce, how does that work?
You mean talking about at farms?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have volunteers who actually go into the farmers' fields and help us harvest.
Mm-hmm.
So at a farm, the biggest cost is labor. And so any farm you go to is leaving perfectly good food on the vine because it's just too expensive for them to remove it all. And so gleaning is kind of the term for it. And so we go into like Hilltop Hanover Farm this past growing season. We were there every Monday. You know, they would just say there's, you know, excess eggplant, there's excess peppers, you know, whatever it was. Our volunteers would go in with our farm crates and harvest whatever was excess.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's also just picking up from the farms. Again, like Hilltop Hanover, whatever they had left from their farmers market was already boxed up for us and just needed to get transported up to our kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so kind of two different ways at farms, harvesting and also just driving it.
Okay.
And at Glenwood, they actually dedicated some rows for Second Chance Food, yeah?
Yeah, last year during the pandemic, they said, what are some of the crops you could use more of? And, you know, so we said, you know, things people are familiar with, lettuce, green beans, summer squash peppers, and they grew some special food just for us to harvest and use.
Cool. Okay. And Karen?
There are people who, you know, use these groups as garbage cans. There are other people who are trying to recycle, you know, they don't, I think the dignity part that you're talking about is so very important, but I'd like to think that even the people who are giving you things that maybe are not correct have a place in their heart where they say, I don't want to throw it in the trash. It's still too good. I can't get rid of it. So is there, or has there been, do you know of an article on, or been published in any of the papers or local papers, Current Highlands or anything like that, on how do you donate? How do you make a donation with dignity? I think that dignity is something I'm taking away from this, which I always was conscious of, but I think it's really brought it to my forefront. And I want to believe that people are trying to do the right thing, but that sometimes they're not doing the right thing. So, I don't know if you know of an article, if you've written an article, if we could get one published in the Current Highlands or PCNR or any of those, so that people do get that same awareness of dignity and think twice before you pass it along.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I don't think I've ever seen an article like that. Yeah, and I mean, I definitely agree with you, Karen. I don't think people are necessarily feeling like, I don't feel like throwing this away. I'll give it to somebody else to throw away. I think it is more like, well, maybe somebody could use it. Maybe it won't end up in the garbage, right? Yeah. Yeah, so maybe we have a writer here right now who wants to write an
I was just going to say, how do we go about getting an article written?
I'm thinking
I
about
don't
it.
feel like,
Oh, Joe's thinking about it.
yeah, I don't know enough about the process, to write an article, but I'd be happy to help anybody who, might write it, need the legwork to go take it somewhere and get it done. So just speak up if you need.
Great, we planted a seed.
Karen, I'm
Joe, I
gonna
like
give you my email address in the chat, and maybe you can shoot me a message.
You're assuming I know how to chat.
Oh.
There's a button at the bottom that says chat, and right now there's a red 17. If you click there, you'll open up the chat. Oh my, so do we think, Joe, Pete, this is a good time to go into some breakout rooms?
Sure.
Sarah's asking, what type of fresh produce is most desired by food pantries? So I guess a couple things. One I would say is, again, things people are really familiar with. The rutabagas and the kohlrabi, people generally just don't know what to do with it. So we try to cook with it at Second Chance Foods versus giving it away just like that. But like carrots, peppers, green beans, the produce that people really recognize from the grocery stores, what the food pantries, I think, give away most easily. And also just, things that are a little bit sturdier. The food's really getting moved around at a food pantry. So, tomatoes are wonderful, but they're also very delicate. So familiarity and sturdiness, I think, are kind of two of the main things that help the food pantries in terms of fresh produce. So Joe, or Pete, did you want to kind of set up the discussion for the breakout rooms, or do you want me to do that?
I can do that while you set up the breakouts, Joe.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I think as Karen's point had been about dignity as as her key takeaway from this conversation, and so let's maybe just get into some small groups to really kind of identify and share, like, what is the thing that really stands out from this hour? Because I think a lot of this stuff is stuff that we've known, but maybe weren't really fully aware of or had forgotten about. Or so what really strikes you? And then the second thing, there's a friend of ours that often says, insight without action is just interesting information. And so what's one thing that you will do as a result of this that could really kind of move this forward in terms of food rescue, in terms of reducing food waste? What's one thing? Okay. And then when we get back, we'll just talk about, like, from each group, like what stands out from your conversations. So you don't need to keep track of anything.
Okay. And Pete, did you say how long we were going to spend in breakout rooms?
How about we do 15 minutes?
You think we need that long? Wow.
How about 10 minutes then?
People heard breakout room and they dropped off.
Minutes.
Okay. All right. There's about 3 people in each breakout room.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, I think 10 minutes is plenty of time. All right, and Pete, maybe we can type those questions into the chat too. All right, here we go.
I'm just typing into the chat.
Okay.
What's
So
one?
are we supposed to answer?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you want to go into a breakout room? Do you see a little invitation to go into a breakout room on your screen, Phyllis?
It says, it might say Joe Montori's inviting up. I guess you
Oh,
did.
there she goes.
All right, I'm going to go join.
Okay. Hi, Susan. I don't know if you can hear me, but oh,
Oh, it looks like we're the only ones here yet.
Nope, no.
Okay. We come
Back.
Hey, Janet.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Joe. I joined late. Sorry.
oh, that's okay. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Pete.
I'm
Good.
so excited about the Repair Cafe.
Yeah, Suzanne and I were just talking about it. She's going to be there as well. Joe
Oh,
will
good.
be volunteering as one of our bike repair people, or rather our bike repair person.
Oh, I'll be
You'll
the
be,
lone bike repair person.
well, we
That's
have
good.
other people who can pinch hit, but you
Good.
will be our dedicated bike repairer.
Hey,
All
Sarah.
we need are some broken bikes now.
Oh, I got plenty.
Well,
I've got
that's
like
what I was-
6
Bring them down. Pete.
second chance
Uh-oh.
bikes. All right.
Rusty too.
Should have never mentioned it to Pete.
I think we're back.
Is everybody back? I've got to go change my view here.
Anybody not back? Raise your hand.
No.
Oh, I'm
No.
back now. I just can't figure out. I did something. I just don't have a visual anymore.
Okay.
Oh.
So maybe kind of when you think back to the conversation you guys have had in your small groups for the last 10 minutes, like what stands out? What stands out from your conversations? Yeah. James.
Everybody in my group said that they're going to volunteer.
Did they?
No, not really, but thought I'd, get the ball rolling.
Yeah, very cool. James, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Pete.
Sure.
So we started talking about dignity, and Suzanne's going to have more to say, but we figured it'd be wise for me to share how there's been a law passed in New York State in December that requires supermarkets and grocery stores to donate their excess foods to charity, which takes effect on June 21st. So it's the Excess Food Law, Bill S4176 and Assembly 4398. And it's law now. It will be law in 2 months. And any organization that donates food, like food banks, pantries, and soup kitchens, can go to supermarkets starting June 21st and collect the excess foods as donations for their work.
Very good.
So yeah, we just mentioned there has to be some logistical coordination between the orgs and the smarts. So if you are involved in any food pantries, I'd say start coordinating that now because it's only about 8 weeks away.
And it
Could
was
you could I ask that you share in the chat the site to that law?
Yes, I'll do that right now.
Great.
Thank you.
And it was one of our local senators, Pete Harcum, who's one of the sponsors of that. So good work on his part.
Good.
Cool.
So we were talking about dignity in our group and how, the conversation that we had in the large group focused or, kind of reminded us about the dignity of the recipients. But the conversation that we had in our group, we realized that the dignity question really applies on both ends, both the giver and the receiver. Anybody who's involved in this process, whether you are a provider or someone who carries the food or someone receives the food, the dignity and that sense of fulfillment applies to everybody that's involved in the process. And it's so exciting to know that this law is in place so that restaurants and grocery stores and anybody who is involved in the food business now is in a position to be able to make that food available, and all of us can play a part, and how wonderful that we can all be part of this solution, no matter whether you have a little bit of time or a lot of time. The other thing is that Sarah mentioned that she is a gardener, and she likes to make her produce available to her members of her church, and they can purchase, and then she can share the proceeds of those of her sales with food pantries. So it really kind of expands and multiplies the benefit of her good work with her gardening. So I think the dignity thing is really exciting.
And Martha, that's really to your point that the pantries can make your money go that much further. And so sure, I could donate the produce directly, but the money is so much more valuable. And of course, people are so generous in giving when they know that what they're giving me for my excess zucchini and tomatoes and cucumbers and things is really going to benefit the pantry.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah. Increase local food, get money to a charity. That's great.
So nice to be part of a conversation that's hopeful and has so many positives in it instead of the usual doom and gloom.
That's where we focus our attention, right?
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, I'm so happy to hear multiple people talking about dignity at the end of this. Glad that message was loud and clear and received.
Yes.
So thank you for that. It's great.
I'm going to put the link to volunteer for Second Chance Foods into the chat one more time. For anybody who joined late, you might not be able to see the whole chat above. But I'll also send an email to folks with these links that you have them later on.
Great. Yeah.
So any other groups want to speak up and kind of share what stands out from your conversations?
Well, our group spoke of the dignity of giving as well. So I don't have anything further to say about that because you've all said it. It seems like everybody chose the same subject.
Wow, that's impressive.
It certainly is.
I think it was in our group as well. I mean, that was a key takeaway. That was just a really nicely reinforced in needing to really keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So.
All right. Well, I guess maybe we should wrap up at this point then. Unless anybody has anything else that they want to add. I do want to once again thank Martha for her time and her expertise.
Yes, thank you.
It was very informative. I always learn something new every time I hear you speak, Martha. And I can't emphasize enough, how, as Pete and I both attested, how rewarding it is to volunteer for Second Chance Foods. And I know Martha is always looking for more help. And I think, as James pointed out, with this new law passed, I think there'll be even more opportunities to help out, which is a great thing. And the need for, food is not going away anytime soon. So please consider that and connect with Martha through the website so that you can, try it out. I'll be sending one more email to everybody again with those links, and if that will subscribe you to Sustainable Putnam if you're not already subscribed. You can always unsubscribe. The routine. You go to the bottom of the email and click the unsubscribe list, and you'll never hear from us again. We'll never bother you again. But I hope you do stay in touch because we are doing some, I think, some pretty amazing things, and we're growing, and our volunteer base is also expanding, and we could also use help. So,
Yeah.
Martha, any last words before we go?
I just think Joe is just an amazing model of what you can do with your retirement. Doesn't have to be all golf.
Absolutely.
Thank you everybody for coming inside on this beautiful day to hear more about what we're doing.
Thank you, Martha.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great rest of the day, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.